Hi, everybody. I am so excited because we are talking today with Lidia Bastianich, who has excited thousands of people in the United States and around the world with her 25 years of cooking shows on public broadcasting, her numerous cookbooks, her extraordinary restaurants, not only in New York City, where she's coming from today. There's undoubtedly no woman who has brought the joy of the Italian joy of living well to more audiences than Lidia Bastianich. Lidia, welcome.
Thank you, Karen. What a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I would love to begin by saying, well, first, about our campaign in the United States, actually internationally, called Share and Pair Sundays. And so I wanted to ask you why, for you, sharing food and wine is important. You've built your whole career on this idea. Why is it important?
Karen, it's life itself. It is at the basis, it's the common denominator that we all have. We need to eat to nourish ourselves, to stay alive. And of course, a glass of wine with that means food. But also, it brings such great pleasure. And you know what, Karen? When you sit with somebody at the table, kind of everything is relaxed, and it really is, because in order, on an animalistic level, if you will, when you're eating, your antagonism, your defenses are down, you're taking in, because you have to take in to nurture yourself and to savor and whatever. So you are in a good place to receive not only you, the people that are with you. You're all on the same, this not this kind of, what is she going to say, how am I going to respond? You're reading, you're sharing. Karen, why do we have business lunches, dinners? Why do we propose great dinners? It's because it is a place that sort of a person opens up, that you could directly enter into a person. So eating together at a table, or even a sandwich with a glass of wine, is really connecting with somebody on a visceral level.
Wow, this idea of being open in a way that you weren't before, perhaps, and that's conducive not only to friendship but also conducive to business is an astounding recognition and realization. And I'm imagining, given that you have owned a number and still do own a number of restaurants, that you've watched that in action at business lunches and business dinners.
I watched it, not only, and I kind of instigated or sort of stimulated it, because as a chef, if I propose uh, that I give you a dish that you're going to share rather than your own little plate, now it's a different setting, a different sentiment. So, I had all that at my, but I still do, when I do with the family, whatever, it makes such a big difference. And, I always get sort of the question, oh, the family, the kids don't want to come to the table, or this or that. It is so important, that family meal, because that's the place that children, you can penetrate the children beyond just, because if you take your child and you said, okay, it's time, we're going to discuss no smoking, no this, no that, you take them in the room, they tense up, they're on the defensive. Instead, you're talking at the table, you're nurturing them, they're enjoying, they're feeding, and then the conversation flows. And you take it as a parent wherever you want, intelligently, or for that case, business meals or proposals or whatever. We're open in receiving, without sort of major blockage and so food is extraordinarily important, not only to nurture us, but to put us in a state of mind.
Yes. I mean, when you think about the world's great pleasures, I remember reading a book years ago by a University of Pennsylvania anthropologist whose name is Lionel Tiger. And he wrote a book called The Pursuit of Pleasure. And the premise of that book was that food and great beverages, and in his mind, wine, were instrumental to the evolution of the species. Because frankly, he said, early life was so difficult, things were so tough that you would have, thrown yourself off the top of the cave or something. But it was the idea of coming home, eating and drinking something with your friends, with your clan, with your family, that allowed the human species to sustain itself, and that is a primal pleasure that harkens back to the very beginning of mankind.
Absolutely, but also really on a physiological, and again, like you do, I love to read and research, is that the beginning of eating cooked food has really shaped the evolution of mankind, because our brain takes about 40-50% of the nourishment that we take in. It's, it really hoards a lot. It needs a lot of nourishment. And
Yes,
as
it does.
as food was cooked, whether it was grilled or whatever, it was easier to digest. The brain got more of the nourishment, and it developed us on. So, cooking food developed us in who we are, but also within that context, develop our style of life, our sharing, our pleasures, our senses, everything.
I wonder, for you, I mean, I love having friends, usually standing in the kitchen or sitting in the kitchen, and I love to have people over for a simple dinner, but I also love just myself standing in the kitchen cooking. And for me, a cooking wine is what you drink when you're cooking. I mean, you might put it in the sauce too, but just standing in the midst of really good ingredients with a bottle of a glass, but a bottle open of nice wine. It's also a very personal kind of satisfaction to work with your hands with food. And I'm wondering if you feel that even when you're just by yourself.
I love touching food. I love it sort of, it speaks to me as a chef. If I touch a meat, or if I touch a fruit, I know if the meat is going to be tender. I know if the fish is fresh, if it's nice and firm, or if it's sort of soft and whatever. I know if a fruit is ripe. And so for me, touching food is just beautiful. It's sensual. Actually, I get emails, says, Lydia, you touch food very sensually. But I do. I connect with it. It talks to me. And, the little glass of wine having there. Now, wine, alcohol and everything in moderation, whatever, it relaxes you a little bit. So you're even more receptible to those sensitive, to these nuances, to this beautiful, whether it's an aroma, whether it looks beautiful, whether it tastes beautiful, whether it's piquant, whether it's a little tangy or whatever. And those are all the beauties, all the rewards that at least I get when I cooked. Absolutely. And you know what, Karen? As I travel, I love to travel. As I travel around the world, there's still a lot of cultures that eat with their hands. I love that. I was in India and lately, and just kind of take the bread naan, and you pick up it's beautiful. It's beautiful because I taste, and it's kind of so natural. The food with my hands, there's no intermediary, if you will. So yeah, uh, getting close to food, smelling it, eating it, touching it. I'm in for the whole. I just love it.
I so agree. And I think this is one of the reasons why one of the basic of all foods, bread, is so satisfying, because you touch it with even in the fanciest restaurant, You are picking up that bread with your hands, you're tearing it apart, you're feeding yourself, you're watching other people do that with you. It's a very, it seems simple, and yet it's a very profound human level of satisfaction when that happens.
Absolutely, absolutely. And bread, for example, as Italians, we don't even eat pasta without bread. We need the last piece of bread to clean up, to mop up the sauce, if you will.
Yeah. It's like for me, it's like a wine glass. Having a piece of bread and a wine glass, both in your hands, you feel like, the world is a difficult place, but right now I feel pretty good
You're pretty
about life. Yes. Yeah. Were you always in love with food, even as a child?
as I was saying, I grew up in a setting in the aftermath of World War II and in an area of Italy that became communist Yugoslavia. So food was scarce and sustenance sort of depended on the work of grandma and grandpa and all of us. We were all involved in so the animals, feeding the animals, milking the goats. Then today everybody's so sensitive in the slaughter of excuse me. Today everybody's so sensitive, whether it's the slaughter of a chicken or whatever. I feel, because I grew up in that. My grandmother did that, and I plucked the feathers off the chicken, and we made blood sausages when the pig was killed, and prosciutto and all of that. That was. We were all grateful. It was a big festa, because there's going to be food for the family for another year or whatever, all the and so I have a reverence for
Mhm.
the animals, the courtyard animals, and everything that goes about food and not wasting. And so I was, as a young I was always involved in food. As I said, milking the goats in the morning with grandma and having my cafe latte, if you will, with goat's milk and a little bit of coffee grandma had. I mean, it's a memory I can't forget. But Karen, what really I think brought me to food was uh, uh, the situation there was tough, and ultimately my parents decided to literally escape back into Italy because they didn't allow you to leave. There was the Iron Curtain, and that's it. And we had family in Italy because the borders went down. You were there, some of it remained under Italy. And when my parents decided to do that, we weren't aware. I wasn't aware. So we came to my great aunt in Trieste, and then my father literally escaped the thing and joined us. I realized that I would not go back to grandma, and food became my connector. I, continued to cook the smells that I cooked, that grandma cooked, whether it was rosemary, whether it was bay leaf, whether it was the onions, the way she cooked. Those were comforting to me as a young 12-year-old, and then coming into the United States, and then here continuing to cook those. That's why my commitment to my traditional cuisine is because it just brought me back into a place. It brought me back to grandma, because food does that to you. It identifies you, who you are and where you come from.
It is so true and so important. It's a very grounding entity, food, and of course, in the Italian way of thinking, food and wine together are the world's longest known marriage, I suppose. But I can't even imagine having Italian food without having wine at the same time. In fact, I mean, it seems like in Italy, wine is food.
It is. No, it's considered food. There's the bread, there's the wine, and then there's whatever else you have. But those things, it's just understood the glasses automatically come out. And even as children, we didn't have sodas or anything. We would have water and a drop of wine in it just to kind of flavor it. So, it was always part of it. And Grandpa, when he ran short on wine, he would give us a little bit of water and vinegar, and he would put a little sugar in there to appease us.
Oh my goodness. Clever grandfather, but
Yeah,
yes, that just shows the importance of wine historically in Italy, and also the importance of wanting the children to feel included, to feel like they were part of that whole family meal and that whole nourishment of the body, but also the mind, and the nourishment of pleasure, of the sense that that you were together, and that this was a way of showing love.
absolutely. Pulling us all together. It was the glue of the family, if you will.
Yeah. Lydia, when you were, not when you were, but when your son Joseph and your daughter Tanya were little, or let's say when they were teenagers, was there a recipe that a dish that they loved and always asked you to cook for them?
Gnocchi was the kind of gnocchi, potato dumplings. They're easy to make; they're not hard, so they would get involved. Not only then, my grandchildren. That's sort of a tradition, and we do because up north we didn't have dry pasta as much as in the south. So whether it was fresh pasta, fettuccine, tagliatelle, or gnocchi, or things like that. But gnocchi were rather common because the potatoes, they were filling, you make them easy. So they loved gnocchi. They still do, when it's a holiday or a feast or something. No, no, yeah, you're making gnocchi. These are the grandkids now. And, it could be because gnocchi could be with any flavor, pesto, butter and cheese, gorgonzola, bolognese, whatever. It's endless how you can dress gnocchi. The sun went down and we left it at that.
Oh yeah, much better. So Lydia, I'm thinking about you just saying gnocchi, and I'm drinking two of your wines. Here's the Bastianich Friulano, which doesn't this look perfect? I think I dressed to be having this wine right now. I can imagine this with gnocchi, or here is your Schioppettino from the relatively rare red grape in Friulano, in Friuli, called Schioppettino. And they're both delicious. I could imagine having either of them with gnocchi. Which would be your favorite?
Absolutely depends on the sauce. So let's say that I would have just a butter and sage and parmigiano dressed gnocchi, which is very common dishes. I would have the friulano.
Yeah.
On the other hand, let's say that I have a nice chicken sauce or rabbit sauce or bolognese sauce or whatever, I would have the schioppettino. Because just so absolutely the gnocchis are constant. The sauces will kind of determine which harmony you make with which wine.
I wonder if you would agree with me that sometimes, even though there are probably really, good reasons behind a kind of classic pairing, sometimes I feel like it's as important to match wine to mood as it is to food, meaning that when you're in the mood to just eat something and drink something, why not? I mean, why not? I don't know, white wine and a hamburger, for example. Sometimes we're just,
Wine,
craving something.
wine again, like putting harmony together. Wine can magnify a situation or diminish, depends. If it's a hot summer day and you want that hamburger, of course, the Tokai would be perfect because it is nice and dry. It has a nice salmon flavor, a flavoring at the end. In the meantime, a nice hamburger with some good cheddar cheese on top, or a little gorgonzola cheese on top, or whatever. Schioppettino,
Mm.
if it's in the fall or something, would be great. But it all depends. It's what that's the beauty of food and wine, and the fun of putting two elements together. It makes you almost like a composer, if you will. You're composing a moment of music, which is in the terminology of flavors and taste, if you will.
Hmm. Do you think, by the way, I'm just imagining you in your kitchen, and I'm seeing in my mind your PBS show, and I'm wondering if you looked at a final plate of food, could you tell whether it was made by a man or a woman? Do you think there's a way that women cook?
I pose that question to myself often. And maybe by the looks, no, but there's something about the flavor and the texture of food that will give me indications. And I can almost say, oh, this was cooked by a woman. In my mind, I say that, I wouldn't say it out. Although I have posed this question to myself often, and I try to analyze it as I eat. And also the ingredients, the choice of the ingredients, all of that, I think, yes, reflects to some extent a woman cooking or a man cooking.
I sometimes think that in particular, soups that use very poor ingredients, that there was a real enterprising woman behind taking stale bits of, the rinds of Parmigiano and some stale bread and some beans and somehow making something delicious, because so often in history, women they weren't in restaurants, they were at home, and they had to make do with whatever ingredients they had on hand, even when times were really difficult.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Women are the nurturers and the cooks, I think, all along. I think, and that was kind of part of being a woman, nurturing, feeding, and of course making things last for a family. Being economical about it. I think that men entered this as a profession, not
Mm.
necessarily as almost a human calling, if you will, like women did. And being as a profession, and specifically, they always say that after the French Revolution, all those court chefs kind of began to open restaurants that became chefs. And I can almost see that because, a man looks for a profession, something that he's going to work, that's going to earn him a keep or whatever. Uh, for a woman, cooking is from the moment that you give birth, you nurture your baby, from with your own milk, going on into cooking for that, the evolution that happens. It's a much more natural nurturing progression.
Mm. Yeah, such an important point. Lydia, do you have I don't know, a dish that you think, well, this isn't particularly healthy, but I really love these two flavors, some together, something simple and messy.
Well, I I love fried certain fried things, the crunch, whether it's the bread, and then I put in the bread in the cheese and in the cheese and the oregano, and gives the whole, whether it's a fish or whatever, and then of course with a nice dressing to go with it. So you have the crunchiness, you have the sauces, whether it's mayo or whatever homemade stuff. But and I know it's frying is not, but people used to, frying was a common, because it's not a long cooking process.
Right.
and it does give you that the kind of crunchiness and flavor. So I think that, you know, the one sort of unhealthy, but something that I love, a treat now and then, is frying
Yeah.
fish, whether it's calamari, whether it's soft shell crabs. I love that.
I'm just imagining a platter of frito
Fritto misto.
misto. Exactly. Thank you for my non-existent Italian there. But yes, because texture, I think we don't value texture enough. I mean, we don't talk about, I know in wine, people talk about flavor all the time, but I feel like, oh my goodness, texture is what often leads you into loving wine. You know, the snappiness of your Friulano, or the beauty, the core, the richness of your Schioppettino. I mean, these are they are feelings that
I
you're
know,
capturing.
to that end, what I really relate to wine as far as uh, texture feeling is the viscosity, how wine travels within your mouth and down as it goes. Does it go smooth? Does it kind of raspy, or is it, you know, does it kind of, is it stagnant? You know, you can pick all those things up in drinking wine, and these are all the extra elements. That's because, you know, we enjoy food, we sense food and wine, and of course I include wine in food, is with the senses. And you know, you look at it, look at food, look at the wine, you know, the color tells you right away, gets you started, and the olfactory, and then the taste. But the actual crunch and tactile is less kind of recognized. But I think it's so important because, you know, if a celery is not crunchy, you know, right away, you know, whether it's a crunchy apple or, and again, in wine, it's, even though it's the finesse of wine, shall we call it, but it has different ways of flowing in your,
Mm.
these different sensations within your mouth.
I call that the choreography of wine. It's not a word usually used with wine, but you're right. I mean, wine has velocity and volume and movement, and it's sort of the way the wine dances, or just blasts across your palate, or sits there slowly. But all of these phenomenon are absolutely true of wine, even though we don't always have good words to describe that phenomenon. So wonderful to speak with you. And by the way, I do want to say that idea of putting the last chunk of a piece of Parmigiano Reggiano in your freezer, saving it, and then putting it in the soup is an idea I learned from you 30 years ago or more. So thank you. I've made better soups as a result of that one tiny little trick.
And you know, it's, you didn't waste it.
I didn't waste it. That's right. Nothing goes to waste. In fact, there are some little rinds of Parmigiano in my freezer right now, waiting for the next soup.
You know what? That stores are beginning to sell those. You know, it comes.
Really?
Yes, yes. It
Well,
comes around. You know, these are traditions. You know, all traditions. Why? You know, they became traditions because they made sense. You know, and why not do it today? I've done it all along.
well, thank you so much for joining us. And you really embody the whole philosophy and idea of Share and Pair Sundays. So I'm so grateful that you would talk with us today. Thank you, Lidia. I raise a toast to you.
Ciao. I having Tokai, which is Friulano. And what are you drinking there?
This is your Schioppettino.
Okay. Salute.
Salute.
Ciao.
Till next time.
Okay. Ciao.
Ciao.